Hey guys, it's Max Steinberg and welcome to another edition of my Lineup Lab. So today I'm going to be talking about some under-owned guys, potentially under-owned guys in the Millionaire Maker this Sunday. And I think there's quite a bit just because of the structure of how this week is going to play out with the cheap running backs and tight ends this week, because we have Scott Chandler, who's going to be a really popular play, only 2,500 at tight end. And we have guys like David Johnson, 3,400, Sean Drone, 4,000, some guys in the 5,000s like McFadden, Rawls, and D'Angelo Williams, and LaShawn McCoy. And there's just not going to be a lot of money spent, in my opinion, at the running back and tight end position. So once again, I think wide receiver is going to be a position a lot of people spend up at, just like last week. And I think what's going to happen is people are going to spend up on a couple of guys. One is going to be Odell Beckham Jr., just because they're facing the Jets at home. Beckham's coming off a great game, and the Jets are going to be probably without Darrelle Revis, and Jarvis Landry on Miami just torched the Jets without Revis last week. So I think Beckham's going to be a really popular play. Probably 1B to Beckham's 1A is going to be Antonio Brown. I think that he's going to, even though he had a disappointing week, he was up against Richard Sherman, and the Colts D is just not very good, so I think he's going to also be a popular play. I think Julio Jones will as well, even though he's coming off a disappointing week, but it's Tampa Bay who has struggled against wide receivers in the past. So there's three guys in the high salary range that I think are going to be under-owned, and I think they're undervalued as well. So I'm just going to get into it. So AJ Green is my first guy. So Green's actually coming off a pretty good game. And he actually has a pretty reasonable price, priced about 1,000 less than all these other guys I just mentioned. And he has a lot of things going for him. So first of all, Cleveland is known for having a bad run D, but they really have a pretty bad D overall. And coming off a really bad loss against Baltimore, I expect them not to play a very motivated defense, and I expect the Bengals to win this game handily, just like the spread dictates. But the thing that I like about Green a lot this week is the absence of Tyler Eifert. It looks like Eifert will probably sit this one out, which pays big dividends for Green, because that means those 12 touchdowns that Eifert has already this season are going to have to be dispersed to other players. And what better guy to go to than AJ Green, who's a tall receiver who can run those plays that Eifert runs, those fade routes, and those high balls in the end zone, those jump balls in the end zone. I think that his touchdown projection goes way up this week. And he actually could, you can make an argument that he's a better dollar-for-dollar play than a guy like Beckham and Antonio Brown. So that's one guy I like. Another is DeAndre Hopkins. So I want to preface this by saying I think that this is a great play just because of how daily fantasy owners think. So I think daily fantasy players are really good at ignoring a poor performance one week if the matchup is right. So, for example, Julio Jones. He had a bad week last week against Minnesota, but he's now going to Tampa Bay, who's really struggled against number one wide receivers. My guess is people play Julio Jones quite a bit just because it's a good matchup and ignore the fact that he had a disappointing game. However, Hopkins also had a disappointing game, and he's really highly played, so he burned a lot of people. But now he's going to Buffalo, who on the surface seems like a good defense, but actually seem more middle of the road to me, and Football Outsiders and Pro Football Focus seem to think the same. And Hopkins is legitimately a top 3 fantasy wide receiver in the league this year. And he has a mediocre matchup, but his upside is just as good as these other guys. And I just think he's not going to be owned enough given his potential and upside in this matchup. So I actually think he's going to fly way under the radar, and I think he's a great GPP play. And then I have one more guy, and I don't like this guy as much as Hopkins or Green, but I do think he's going to have really low ownership, probably 3 to 5%, and that's Demaryius Thomas, and I could see him even getting less. So, first of all, he's had 2 straight weeks where he just hasn't had very good games with Brock Osweiler starting. I think generally people are just going to ignore him just based on that, but also contributing to it is the fact that Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey, both guys who are really good and with great matchups, are right in this price range. So I really think Demaryius Thomas is going to get really low ownership because people are just forgo him for these two, or maybe even Allen Robinson or Mike Evans. I could see as well. And although Demaryius Thomas only got one catch last game, he did get 13 targets. And it was kind of fluky game. It was played in the snow. And 13 targets is a ton. I just don't. And it's sort of on par with what he's been getting all season. I just don't think this is a Brock Osweiler or Demaryius Thomas chemistry thing. I just think he's had a couple fluky games. And I could definitely see him bouncing back. San Diego isn't exactly like the juiciest matchup for wide receivers. It's sort of more middle of the road. But he's only 7,200. He's capable of having the biggest game out of any wide receiver this week. And I just don't think he has any business being 2% owned. So I think you should put him in some of your lineups. Don't go crazy, but I think that he deserves to be owned more than 2% and could actually win you a GPP this week. So I just named 3 wide receivers that I think are going to fly under the radar. And I'm going to leave you with one more that's a QB wide receiver stack that I really like. And that's Derek Carr with Amari Cooper. Now, Carr is coming off a good game. And so I don't think people are going to totally overlook him. But with guys with great matchups like Cam Newton, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Andy Dalton, Russell Wilson's only 5,600. I think Carr's not going to be owned that much. And I think he actually flew a little under the radar just because so many quarterbacks did well this week. But I do really like the stack because, A, it's a stack that could produce really big. Cooper's the type of receiver who can have really, really big games. And he's actually coming off a great game against Tennessee. He just didn't have a touchdown. But one thing I really like is that the Chiefs are probably going to be without their best pass rusher, Lamar Houston, or maybe Justin Houston. I think it's Justin Houston. Anyway, yeah, Justin Houston is right. He's a really great pass rusher, and don't underrate pass rush with passing performance. Pass rush really, really helps makes it tougher for teams to throw the ball. And if a team has a lack of the pass rush here, I think Derek Carr is going to have a much easier time throwing. And I actually expect him to have some success against the Chiefs D. That's good, but their secondary is still struggling. I think the lack of pass rush will probably expose their secondary even more. So I actually think the stack is going to be underused, and I think it's really underrated this week. I think it could be one of the top stacks. So those are my 4 under the radar plays. Thank you guys for watching, listening, going on Daily Fantasy Winners. Please like this video if you did actually enjoy it, and subscribe to our feed. And look out for more content later in the week. Thanks, guys.